A lady's conduct is never so entirely at the mercy of critics, because never so public as when she is in the street. Her dress, carriage, walk will all be exposed to notice. Every passer-by will look at her. If it is only for one glance, every unladylike action will be marked, and in no position will a dignified ladylike deportment be more certain to command respect. The Lady's Book of Etiquette and Manual of Politeness, a complete handbook for the use of the lady in polite society, by Florence Hartley.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Well House Exorcism. This is your ghost of a host of the most, Shanna.
It's Puckwell PJ.
And for this series, we have our special guest again.
Hi, it's Carrie.
Who will not be talking at all because she has laryngitis. And
Penny.
No, you're Psycho Penny.
Psycho Penny.
There it is.
I like it.
But now for a nice surprise, no one knew this, we have...
Nurse Jackie.
Woo-woo! We get all the cool stuff. All right. This episode is the third and final in our series on Lizzie Borden. We are taking a deep look into the past, Victorian ideals and beliefs, societal standards, and the flawed judicial system of the time period. Due to the range of topics, we offer a warning to our more sensitive listeners. Please be warned. But first, Puckwell PJ.
Yes.
I want to start with a joke that was popular during the trial times of Lizzie Borden. You ready?
I'm ready.
On the morning of the fateful 4th of August, someone asked Miss Lizzie the time of day. "I don't know," she replied, "but I'll go and ask Father." There you go. No laughing, Carrie.
Sorry.
When Penny read that, she laughed out loud. So I just wanted you to know that. All right, so all of us together use lots of references, so I included yours in here too, Nurse Jackie. Our references are famoustrials.com, highspeedtraining.co.uk, historicuk.com, lancasterhistory.org, Lizzie Borden, Past and Present by Leonard Ribello, the Borden Bible, as PJ calls it, bentalfloss.com, mayoclinic.org, and The Trial of Lizzie Borden, edited with a history of the case by Edmund Pearson, and apparently someone used Wikipedia. I did not this time. So whoever...
I don't
Oh, I
believe
think
you.
I did.
It was Nurse Jackie. So as always, we have Wikipedia.
I'm looking at Wikipedia.
Look at you. All right. So Nurse Jackie happened to, well, I love how people are always texting me and telling me their ideas. So thank you for messaging and sending me voice messages. And I like when my listeners pop in with their ideas.
Yeah, we were walking through Walmart and she has her phone up to her ear listening to your dictations.
I'm like, shh, Nurse Jackie's talking. I don't care if they want the monster truck. Nurse Jackie's talking.
We just sent her a voice text.
And so you had lots of interesting theories, especially after part 2, because of what had happened that day, the heat and all that kind of stuff. So you sent me some notes on the dress of the time period and also like what happens with dehydration. So before we even get into the trial stuff today, I want you to just take it away and you tell me all about your cool doctoring stuff, medical expert.
So first off, the dress kind of intrigued me when you guys were talking about that and how she could have got it off so fast. So of course I had to dig in. But the dresses back then, first, August 4th was a 82 degree, about dry humidity, not too bad. But back then that was hot. So the dress includes, they were in the 1890s, they were changing. They weren't wearing crinolines and bustles as much in the back. The dresses, they were changed in the morning, afternoon, and evening. So they always had 3 wardrobe changes. It just depended on the time of day. And they were all in different designs. Sportswear was just being developed for women. It was more of a waist shirt and a skirt and with a bodice tailored top as well, like a man's shirt.
So not yoga pants and a sports bra?
And a tank top. No, not like nowadays. Like we're all sitting here right now, nice and cool.
The fun stuff.
So one of the outfits, this one took a model 6 minutes and 20 seconds to dress into. It was to include stockings, garters, a corset, a small bustle pad, 2 petticoats, a wool skirt, a necktie, a wool waistcoat, and it took her 6 minutes and 20 seconds, but that was without putting her shoes on or doing her hair.
So anyway, with the clothes in the time period then, like what you're saying is it's still pretty heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was just the basic, like, afternoon stuff, but summerwear was more of a chemise. The split drawers, which was fascinating because we had the discussion about going to the bathroom and how they would change. Stocking, shoes, corset, hoop skirt, light cotton petticoat, a top shirt, a blouse, a waist shirt, a waistcoat, gloves, and a bonnet if needed. So it was still a very large amount of clothing that they were wearing. And sometimes they would have their aprons over them or other things when they were doing housework. So they still had all of that clothing on with an apron over it. But the one that was funny to me was the split crotch drawers. It made it easy for women to use the restroom. I'll leg up on it, put the bucket underneath us. So no skirts or anything, but you could also, if you needed to sit, you could bunch everything up and sit down because it was very pliable material. So with all of that material on, we all know how hot we get just being in basic summer clothes. Can you imagine back then? So that, to me, went off into dehydration and all kinds of tangents that I had. Back in 1891, they had a flu epidemic. And as we know nowadays, the flu still causes serious problems, and it can lead to long-term effects such as heart conditions, all kinds of lung conditions, anything. So imagine you're suffering through that. You have no medication. It was just basically, sweat it out, starve of cold, beat a fever.
Yep. So
that could have weakened their immune system. And then if they were eating mutton and playing with their pigeons, they could have gotten food poisoning. So food poisoning, everybody knows food poisoning and the flu both can cause severe dehydration, which can be fatal. It causes blurred vision and seizures. Dehydration also causes an extreme thirst, dizziness, and confusion. Cholera is another one, and there was an outbreak back in 1881 to 1896, and it's an infection of the small intestine. It causes diarrhea, which also leads to, go figure, dehydration and electrolyte imbalances. And that one you have to have antibiotics for, and back then they didn't have it.
I'd say they didn't have it. Yeah, it didn't exist then.
Yeah. But the one that really got me was listeria. Listeria is caused from salmonella or E. coli, and it's commonly found in food, plants, water, sheep, which they make mutton, guts, cattle, and cattle could contain listeria, unpasteurized milk, soft cheese, raw fruits, and vegetables. If you think about it, they were growing all of their own fruits and vegetables. Let's not forget they had pigeons on the land.
Well, that, and they only had unpasteurized milk then. It's part of our conversation because it was like going bad really fast. Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
So listeria causes nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, chills, muscle aches, fever, chills like you get with the stomach flu, more severe seizures, disorientation and confusion, and headaches.
So remind me, for listeria or for E. coli, that also can happen if you don't wash your hands after going poop, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm just...
Yep. We're getting there.
Oh, okay. I call it like I see it, all right.
We're getting there.
I like Listerine. I don't like Listeria.
I actually had a question about the dresses. How much did all that clothes weigh?
I didn't actually look at the weight, but I can only imagine, especially if they were all the wool skirts and everything. I ain't doing it. I don't want the stockings. I don't want any of it.
Because you got to think,
me my
if
tank
she
top and my
did it
yoga
and she
pants.
was wearing all that, how can you get things done quickly? I'm not team Lizzie didn't do it. But still, you got to think. Like, as a woman, I'm sorry.
No,
as a
I like
person,
to think that you hop on the scale and you go, oh, that's not fat. That's all my clothes. So maybe we should dress in their clothes. We can feel thinner.
Well, and if you think about that, though, with all the dresses, they couldn't get all of it on by themselves. Like, I was watching this girl try to put on her corset, and she literally had to use a special tool to, like, reach behind her to tie it tighter. So it's fascinating to me that if she had done it by herself, I know, let's suck all in the fat and not be able to breathe for days. Let's go.
And if you're sick with a stomach flu-ish kind of thing and you put on a corset, no thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then you're already sweating from the chills and everything else. And now you have all those clothing on because it was improper to be walking around in your bedclothes all day. And you still had to do your chores. So back to all of the illnesses, though, any one of those can cause what we call hyponatremia, and that's low sodium. And when you have low sodium, it can cause nausea and vomiting. It's kind of funny how we can have nausea and vomiting and then get something else that causes more nausea and vomiting. But with hyponatremia, you get confusion, irritability, disorientation, neurological manifestations. And it can be caused by drinking too much water or the stomach flu or being sick. So when you drink too much water, it actually imbalances all of your...
Is it electrolytes?
Yeah, your electrolytes. Thank you. One for Shanna.
Not that kind of doctor. Okay.
So yeah, it imbalances all of that, and you have to have a good balance of all of this stuff in your body. That's why we need salt. Salt helps us retain water because your body needs water, but it also helps your heart function properly. So without that, and then she was already sick, she's dehydrated, all of these things could cause anything. So when I came up with all of that, I came up with delirium. Delirium can come on fast or within hours or a few days. Factors may include severe or long illnesses and imbalance in the body, such as low sodium, a UTI, fever, new infections, exposure to toxins such as carbon monoxide or cyanide. Oh, cyanide. Poor nutrition or loss of too much body fluid, infection, alcohol or drug use. Symptoms of delirium are sometimes confused with symptoms of dementia. They have a reduced awareness of surroundings, poor thinking skills, not knowing where they are or who they are, behavior and emotional changes, which include anxiety, fear, or distrust of others, short temper or anger, quick changes in mood, personality changes, or seeing things others don't.
And what's interesting is the night before the murders, Lizzie was over at her friend Alice's house. Correct me if I'm wrong, ladies. And she had said something along the lines of she thought that someone was going to like kill her dad,
Yes.
right? So that could be like that behavior, emotional change, that anxiety, that fear.
Yeah, and if it was starting the night before, God knows what it manifested to into the next day. I mean, unfortunately, the chemical balances in our body affect our brains so much that it comes up with all kinds of socio disorders, neurological disorders.
And I think with dementia, isn't it worse at night?
Yes, right?
Yes.
Penny, right? Yeah.
Very much so.
Sundowning.
Yeah.
Sundowning, okay, yeah.
That's my specialty. So drugs used back then were opium, morphine for pain, and then it was all natural stuff. Willow bark and meadows root for fevers. Cathartics from plants were used to defecate and cleanse lower GI tracts, which you don't want to do if you have a GI problem. We don't need to clear it out. We need to try and retain everything in. So they strongly believed in letting the illness run its course, and they treated the symptoms, not the actual causes. So if you had a fever, they were going to treat the fever. They didn't care what was causing it. So food poisoning can cause severe dehydration, which can be fatal and cause blurred visions and seizures. And then my favorite part, pigeons carry salmonella and E. coli. So even from handling them, she could have got E. coli from wet droppings that may contaminate the water, and salmonella. And the salmonella comes from dry droppings, which is ingested with food. And guess what? They didn't wash their hands after they handled everything. So dirty pigeon hands on my food.
And what's interesting is PJ was reading the Borden Bible, as we call it. And he's like, guess what about the pigeons?
She did have pigeons. She had a pigeon loft.
Yeah, the writer Leonard Rebello.
Rebello, yeah.
He did a lot of research, and he found, right, that...
Yes, she testified that she spent 15 minutes up there the morning of the murder, and a neighbor saw her in that area, too.
Yeah, and she was looking out the window at her pigeon. Was it called a rooster, or what was it called?
Loft. Pigeon loft. Yeah, she was down underneath looking up at it, because she wanted to get some sinkers so she could go fishing. And she ate 3 pears when she got up to the pigeon loft. And then she stayed up there for 15 minutes. And then she went back down and looked for the sinker some more in the toolbox. And then she went inside finally.
So she was hanging out with the pigeons, and they actually kept
eating pears
pigeons.
in the loft.
Putting her around.
Puttering around.
Puttering around.
You have to think about it. If she was out there, the pigeons had their droppings. It's contaminated the soil. They're growing their garden, and that they probably used it even as a manure at the time because they didn't know any better. So she's ingesting it that way. She's got it on her hands, and long exposure to it, she's definitely going to catch some stomach illnesses. And E. coli is nasty. So God only knows. She could have very well mentally been off just from a very common illness now.
Lizzie, you thought that the pigeons were your friends. Lizzie, how do you feel knowing that the pigeons were the reason that you went crazy?
I won't believe it. They wouldn't betray me like this.
Is that why your father killed them?
They're my feathered friends.
Feathered friends. Oh, I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Nurse Jackie, for all of your ideas. And I like that you mentioned the dress, because a lot of this episode is going to be the Victorian ideal. And honestly, how that really benefit. If your team Lizzie did it, the Victorian ideal for a woman really saved her Like that is what kept her from going to jail and possibly being killed. So into the story proper, I actually wanted to start off my part talking about what the Victorian ideal was, just so you can see like how it's going to carry Lizzie through that next year. So according to historyuk.com, writer Kiara Boyle said, "The idea that women were the weaker sex was a societal norm that has been instilled into British culture for centuries and was hardly exclusive to the Victorian period. However, the Victorian values that discerned the perfect woman were particularly severe, encouraging traits such as intellectual inferiority, passivity, and selflessness. Plus, a woman's primary role was simply to bear children and do the housework." And as you saw, but Penny, too, with the opening quote, there were beliefs about how women should kind of carry themselves, to deport themselves throughout the day, even in the streets, because that was proper. And so many times when you look at the court transcripts, there's this constant comment about her being a good church woman, having high morals. So that is what saves her, is because of this Victorian idea. So the common idea of the perfect Victorian woman would be the crux that would ultimately save Lizzie Borden from a guilty verdict. So I want to move right into let's final section.
Some might say she worked religiously in the Sunday school area.
Oh, God.
I don't like when you guys laugh at that. All right.
I bought you the bat for a reason.
It's still upstairs in the bedroom.
I keep forgetting the wand.
Yes.
I know. I look at it every day and I'm like, I gotta take that downstairs. I always think that. And it just stays on my dresser. When we last closed our episode, we were talking about the investigation of the murder. It was a botched affair, to say the least, and trial transcripts would prove that investigators, policemen, and doctors alike would spend at times less than 5 minutes observing or examining the scenes of the crimes or even the bodies. Overall, the police came to the conclusion that the murders must have been committed by someone within the Borden home, but were puzzled by the lack of blood anywhere except on the bodies of the victims. There was a definitive lack of blood on Lizzie, even though there were the menstrual rags bucket in the basement. Added to this, they were unable to uncover any obvious murder weapon. As mentioned before, increasingly suspicion turned toward Lizzie, since her older sister Emma was out of the home at the time of the murders. There was simply no one else that could have done the deed. And once they pivoted and believed it was Lizzie, like that was it. They just said, okay, it's Lizzie, we're going to prove it was Lizzie. And I think that really botched their entire investigation because they weren't looking at anybody else.
Well, and that's how police work still is. I mean, once they have a narrative, and you there are documentaries about it where the cops will straight up say, like, there is good evidence and there's bad evidence, and bad evidence is evidence that goes against our narrative. And like, even if it does maybe exonerate someone, it complicates the story, and we don't want that.
Yeah. Which is annoying because in science, and Nurse Jackie will attest to this, like, you want to have whatever the data is, that's the data. It's important for correlations and causations. Yeah. Even if it goes against your idea, your hypothesis, it's still important data to have.
Yeah.
But yeah, less than 5 minutes on each body. Jackie, I saw you like roll your eyes at that. I saw your reaction via Zoom.
Yeah, the true crime buff in me is just like, oh my God.
When we were reading, we're like, really? And then like putting blankets over the bodies, putting shoes back on them, moving the bodies to get better pictures. How dare you?
They did put their stomachs in wax sealed jugs, so
I did.
Eyeballs too, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Milk or something.
You know, one of Andrew's eyes, not both of them, but anyway. The police and investigators found it odd that Lizzie knew so little of her mother's whereabouts after 9 a.m. They also found it unbelievable in her story that during the 15 minutes in which Andrew Borden was murdered in the living room, Lizzie was out in the backyard barn looking for irons, or lead sinkers, for an upcoming fishing excursion. The barn loft where she said she had looked revealed no footprints on the dusty floor, and the stifling heat in the loft seemed likely to discourage anyone from spending more than a few minutes searching for equipment that would not be used for days. So Lizzie became their primary and honestly only suspect, and due to this, other avenues were ignored.
So with that, if she was already experiencing any delirium or dehydration, she wouldn't even notice how hot it was.
Nope, yeah.
Because her brain mentally would not have been functioning that it's too hot, I shouldn't be here. It's the same thing people suffer with heat stroke.
Yeah.
They don't realize they should get out of the sun.
Our one friend just went home and she was on our midweek mini, and she's like, I actually vomited this morning. I'm like, well, honey, you got heat stroke. You've been busy. Yeah. It's been crazy since before. It's been hot up here. You're doing way more than you're used to. Like, it's heat stroke. You need to relax. You need to lay down. But But anyway, Penny actually did some research on this. And it's important because Lizzie became their only suspect, which means they ignored everything else. And there was a famous man-on-the-train serial killer, right, Penny, that was just starting. So I want you to take it away and tell us who could have actually been the murderer, not Lizzie. So if your team Lizzie did not do it, Penny's going to help you.
Well, there is gossip that he had an illegitimate son.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Had some mental issues and may have done it, or they still think it was the brother-in-law.
John Morse?
Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, you had used this quote from the beginning.
I want to say I totally called it. I totally knew that it was from this time period. I had no idea. No, it was just a really good quote.
About an axe murderer named Paul Mueller. So there was a guy named Bill James who is known as a baseball analyst, and he got interested in this axe murder in Iowa in 1912. And the more he and his daughter ended up researching it, they came up with this guy could probably have killed between 59 to 100 people. And the murderers were usually close by, a short walk from a railroad. Usually it was an entire family, though, small towns with little or no police force.
There you go.
Or they were off at a picnic.
Yeah, amusement park.
The families often had a barn where the killer was believed to have hidden to observe them. Families had no dog to warn them. And he used the blunt edge of an axe. Would sometimes cover the victims with sheets prior to the murders to prevent blood spatter.
Very smart.
So there were a lot of things that in his murders that kind of fit.
No, it's the same time period. When did he start?
Well, his first one, they said, was like 7 to 9 years before the Bordens.
Oh, okay.
But who knows? Maybe the Bordens were his first attempt.
You know, his name was Paul. I'm not saying that Pauls are evil or crazy, but Paul's, man.
Yeah, I know. Can't trust him.
So did he ever get caught?
Nope. Never got caught. As a matter of fact, one of the first murders they suspected he was involved in, the police, really thought it was him, and they let him get away, and he just hopped on a train and off he went.
On to the next.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And that was up and down the East Coast?
Well, all the way down to Iowa, so following train lines.
Yeah.
And there was some speculation that he went across the pond and did a murder over in Germany, possibly.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Well, you go on vacation, you might as well, have some fun while you're on vacation.
That's true. And
bring your axe.
Oh my
A couple serial killers have done that,
Can you get a hatchet or an axe through customs?
I was just going to ask.
No, see, he was an itinerant lumberjack, so he would pick up axes.
Oh, there you go. It's
where
his
he was
job.
working. Yeah,
That's right. Look at that.
and then he could just leave them behind.
Right? Why is your fingerprints on
and
the
that's the
axes?
thing is because
Well,
the
there's no
axe that did the murders, that was used, was a brand new axe.
It had to be, or
Yeah, it had to be, because there was a coating on all new axes, and the more you used it, the more that wore off, from use. And they found flecks of this gilt that you could see with the eye in their faces.
Oh.
So they knew it was a brand new axe, or a very rarely used axe. If it
Did
wasn't
you learn that
new.
in the Borden Bible?
I did.
I knew it.
But they only took 5 minutes on each person and they saw that?
Probably saw it later, right?
Apparently. Well, I mean, again, that you could see it with the naked eye, so they probably noticed something shiny, in their faces.
Well, in their defense, they did send stuff away to actual doctors at universities,
Yeah.
and all those doctors testified.
Yeah,
The
first
policemen,
autopsy.
they were idiots, but
The
doctors
first
did a good
autopsy
job.
was nothing. It
Yeah.
was in the dining room and on boards.
Yep. Oh, yeah, it wasn't actually on the table.
Oh,
they
good.
put PJ learned.
Yeah,
that
the coroner has special autopsy boards that he would bring with him. So they put them on boards and did cursory autopsies there and packed away some of the organs and things like
Well, that's
that.
nice to know because that really grossed me out.
Yeah. And then he took them back to his lab area, whatever he calls it,
His dungeon.
his lair.
They were sitting on his sofa. He was hanging out, having afternoon tea with them.
Halloween
Weekend at
decorations.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh boy. So, okay, they never caught this killer then, right?
No.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Since the investigators refused to actually investigate, we only have a little bit of evidence, honestly, and it primarily focuses on the blood or lack thereof and the dress. So that is like where I focus like the entire script pretty much. And PJ has lots of stuff about the dress or dresses. Because as you said, they changed dresses 3 times, Jackie, right? So PJ mentions that too. So I want to talk about the pretrial. So right after the murder. Okay, we're picking up there. After very brief investigations, Lizzie Borden was arrested on August 11th, 1892. So, like a week later. On August 12th, she entered a plea of not guilty. From there, Lizzie was moved to a jail in Taunton, 8 miles north of Fall River. In the ensuing 10 days afterward, doctors were called and samples were sent to different universities. Autopsies were performed on both the bodies. From there, on August 22nd and 23rd, a preliminary hearing was held. Judge Josiah Blaisdell found that there was probable cause to try Lizzie for murder. Because of this, a hearing was planned. After one postponement, it began on August 25th. Now, I like to say this to say that this was the hearing of the century would not be an understatement because there were reporters there from 40 different newspapers.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. The book from Leonard Ribello said there were at least 43 reporters and sketch artists in that courtroom.
How big was that courtroom?
I know. It's not a big courtroom.
They were sandwiched in like sardines, yeah. And it's already hot enough.
Yeah.
All right. Except for the presence of a jury, this was practically a trial, and it lasted 6 days. More than 20 witnesses were examined, and nearly all of them, with others, testified later at the trial before the Superior Court. So it really was like a trial, but a pre-trial. It's crazy. If they had a jury, she probably would have been like just sentenced then. But then things became serious in November. So we're talking months later. The grand jury met, and at first they refused to issue an indictment because she was a nice Victorian lady. But they changed their minds after hearing new evidence, because on November 31st, Alice Russell told the grand jury about the visit she received from Lizzie the night before the murders, and there she was talking about, how Lizzie was scared that someone was going to kill her father, and the tenants were angry, and whatever. And then, of course, she discussed the dress, too. So from this evidence, the grand jury issued an indictment against Lizzie for the murder 2 days later. Now, Alice Russell, as I mentioned, was a family friend. She had stayed with the Borden sisters in the days following the murders. Russell told grand jurors that she had witnessed Lizzie Borden burning a blue dress in the kitchen fire, allegedly because, as Lizzie explained, it was covered with old paint. Coupled with the earlier testimony from Bridget Sullivan that Lizzie was wearing a blue dress on the morning of the murders, the evidence was enough to convince grand jurors to indict Lizzie for the murder of her parents. The judge, though, which I thought was kind of really sweet, again, being this Victorian genteel man who just believes, in the ideal Victorian, he didn't want to indict her because she was a good Christian lady. So when the judge finally gave his decision, he actually addressed Lizzie by her first name because he just saw her as this like sweet little innocent female, even though she was 33 years old. But he said at this meeting, "Suppose for a single moment a man was standing there. He was found close by the guest chamber, which to Mrs. Borden was a chamber of death. Suppose a man had been found in the vicinity of Mr. Borden, was the first to find the body, and the only account he could give of himself was the unreasonable one that he was out in the barn looking for sinkers. Then he was out in the yard. Then he was out for something else. Would there be any question in the minds of men what should be done with such a man?" And at that point, he actually pauses, and there are tears in his eyes. And so he says, "So there is only one thing to do, painful as it may be. The judgment from the court is that you are probably guilty, and you are ordered committed to wait the action of the Superior Court." And so it's just like this judge is crying because he has to hand out this you're gonna be arrested, you're indicted. It's sorry.
You probably killed your daddy, but you gotta send you away.
But up until that point, people didn't believe she did it. But once he said you're probably guilty, that's what turned everyone on her. And so then you have this court of public opinion, and the next year is just terrible for Lizzie. She is sitting in, jail and whatnot for a while. The reporters are saying terrible things. People are selling evidence and selling stories, making it more sensational. You have Eli Bentz come forward, the druggist, right, from the pharmacy who almost sold her prussic acid or whatever. So it becomes very, very sensationalized. And that's over the next year. And then we finally get to the trial.
On June 5th, 1893, the trial of Lizzie Borden officially opened at the New Bedford Courthouse. On the advice of her attorneys, Lizzie Borden had retained as the leader of her defense George Robinson, who had the reputation of being one of the best jury lawyers in the state. Years earlier, he had served as a member of Congress when his party had called him back to Massachusetts to be the governor. He was elected for 3 terms and he had retired from the governorship about 6 years before this trial. He was shrewd and thoroughly understood the opinions and prejudices of the plain man in rural districts and small communities. With him were Mr. Jennings and Mr. Adams. And a jury was selected as well. They were all older white men. And their names are as follows: Charles I. Richards, George Potter, William F. Dean, John Wilbur, Frederick C. Wilbar, Lemuel K. Wilbur, William Westcott, Louis B. Hodges, Augustus Swift, Frank G. Culf, John C. Finn, and Alan H. Wardell. The court appointed Mr. Richards to act as foreman.
Which is important. I love how it's all older white men.
Yeah, you look at that picture and you're like, oh my.
I was what you said. They all had a look about them, is what you said?
Yeah. And even like all of Lizzie's friends, they all look the same. Like, they all look like the same person.
Well, I wonder if Lizzie was sitting there going, yes, when she sees the jury. A judge already cried when he put me into jail. This is going to be great for me. I don't know how you respond.
Before a jury of 12 men, Moody opened the state's case, and when Moody carelessly threw Lizzie's blue frock on the prosecution table during his speech, it revealed the skulls of Andrew and Abby Borden. The sight of her parents' skulls caused Lizzie to fall into a faint that lasted for several minutes, sending a thrill of excitement through awestruck spectators and causing unfeigned embarrassment and discomfiture to penetrate the ranks of counsel. For most of the 2 hours of Moody's speech, Lizzie watched from behind a fan as the prosecutor described Lizzie as the only person having both the motive and opportunity to commit the double murders, and then pulled from a bag the head of the axe that he claimed Lizzie used to kill her parents. This opening salvo began, then, a 1.5-week-long court case.
And so all this information that we are using now is coming directly from Famous Trials, or it's coming from the transcripts. I went through the 400-page transcript of the trial itself to pull stuff out. So I want to say that my head hurts, but it's a good thing I'm a speed reader. So I know all the witnesses. I know what they talked about. So many witnesses were brought forward during the trial, including the 20 I'd mentioned from the original hearing. The most important of these witnesses would be 26-year-old Bridget Sullivan, and of course later Alice. But Bridget was important because she testified that Lizzie was the only person she saw in the home at the time the Bordens were murdered, which could be bad for Lizzie. But Bridget stated that during her over 2 years of service to the family, there were absolutely no signs of the rumored ugly relationship between Lizzie and her stepmother. Bridget actually stated, and she's quoted as saying, "Everything was pleasant. Lizzie and her mother always spoke to each other." Sullivan also testified that Andrew and Abby Borden experienced stomach pains on the day before the murder and told jurors that at the presumed time of Abby's murder, she was washing outside windows. She testified that she opened the door for Andrew Borden after he returned home from his walk about town, and then described hearing Lizzie's cry for help a few minutes after 11 o'clock. So overall, I would say, like when I was reading over, Bridget's testimony really helped Lizzie because even though the prosecution asked her questions, when it was time for the cross-examination, Robinson and Jennings were able to ask her questions that only validated Lizzie. So really good, important witness. After that, they bring in Dr. Bowen, they bring in Adelaide, John Fleet, and then, of course, Alice Russell, so some big names.
The next set of witnesses described events and conversations after the discovery of the murders. Dr. Bowen, the Borden family physician, summoned to the home by Lizzie in the late morning of August 4th, recounted Lizzie's story about looking for lead sinkers in the barn and her contention that her father's troubles with his tenants probably had something to do with the murders. On cross-examination, Dr. Bowen agreed with the defense's suggestion that the morphine he prescribed for Lizzie might account for some of the confused and contradictory testimony she gave at the inquest following the murders. Morphine taken in dosages as Lizzie was taking could create hallucinations.
And he also said during the trial, yes, I gave her bromocaffeine, a lot of it, which isn't going to cause hallucinations, but now she's hopped up on caffeine. I know that caffeine can have ill effects too, we found now, right, Nurse Jackie?
Yeah, it can dehydrate you as well.
Oh, great. Let's just add that in.
Yeah, why not? One more thing. The funny thing, though, about that is morphine back then, we know now that you have to give morphine in small doses because it can cause so much trouble. Like, that's, I hate to say it this way, but the death nurses, that's how they do it, is they overdose with morphine to slow down the heart rate and the respirations to have somebody die. So if you give it in the wrong dose, you could die. If she had opium in her system from poppy seeds or anything, that could counteract that as well. So fun.
I just want to say that it's a vicious lie that caffeine causes any ill effects because coffee is life. Am I right, ladies?
Yes, I agree.
Yes,
Absolutely.
And nobody's dead because I had my coffee today.
That's right. There it is.
Right?
It didn't help your throat, but no one died.
Nobody died. So, you got to take the good with the bad, right?
And so I liked Adelaide Churchill, and PJ actually has some stuff to add about the dresses for this. But Adelaide Churchill, she was the bored neighbor. She was walking on the street when Lizzie's freaking out. So she's the one who comes in. She helps find Abby. Okay, so Adelaide, that's her. She was important because she remembered Lizzie wearing a light blue dress with a diamond figure on it, but did not recall seeing any blood spots on the dress itself. So much of the prosecution's evidence I mentioned hinged on this dress. There was a single blood spot. They really focused on the color of the dress. Was it light blue or dark blue? And then what was she burning and why was she burning it? So PJ, having gone through the Borden Bible, has some stuff to say about that.
Yeah, basically they all saw the same blue dress. Dr. Bowen says, quote, "It was sort of drab, not much color to it to attract my attention. Sort of mourning calico, I should judge. The dress is a common, ordinary, unattractive common dress that I did not notice especially. I should call it dark blue." Mrs. Churchill talks more like a valley girl in this quote. Light blue and white groundwork, it seemed like calico or cambric, and had light blue and white groundwork and dark navy blue diamond print on it. It looked like blue and white ground to me, with deep navy blue diamond printed on it. Well, diamond is the most distinctive thing in my mind. It had a navy blue. Well, the figure was printed all over the goods. A cotton dress, either calico or cambric. It was cotton or calico or cambric, I think. A box pleat or something down the front. End quote.
No one focuses on what you're wearing because there are dead bodies in the house. Like I'm sorry. It's hard for someone to think back to what were you wearing. Like, if you have a really good memory, of course you can. But I'm not going to remember, like, what t-shirt PJ was wearing on a day that something happened. I don't remember what I wore. Like, I for some reason, my brain works with that. But I just like Dr. Bowen. It was a dress.
It was unattractive. Which, a rapper, I mean... Yeah, they are not flattering.
I'm sure she wasn't trying to show off the goods there with that. All right, so in any case, after Adelaide, they actually had John Fleet hop up on the seat, and he was the assistant marshal of Fall River. So he recalled his interview with Lizzie shortly after the murders. Now here's the thing. She is strung out on morphine and bromocaffeine. So again, her testimony, I just feel like anything that she did and said during her interviews at that point should just be stricken from record because she was drugged and hopped up.
I'm feeling good.
What color was your dress, Lizzie?
It was all the colors.
So Lizzie... Lizzie actually corrected John Fleet. He testified when he called Abby Borden her mother. Lizzie said,
"She was not my mother, sir. She was my stepmother. My mother died when I was a child."
Now, this could be her... Well, she is technically correct.
Well, one of the principals of the school where she went, attended remembered her and her disdain for her stepmother. Quite, and Emma's too. Like, they were both very vocal about how they felt about Emma. Or Abby, I mean.
Yeah, and then...
I forgot her name.
So, and this is coming out of the Borden Bible. You want to believe it, but how much are they playing into, the hearsay of the time period, So, I don't know.
False memories and things like that being implanted.
Everyone hates their mom and their dad once in a while. We all were teenagers, and these girls had lots of reasons to be mad, so...
Anyway. Do you trust the source?
I think also back then, though, it was a big thing for, even if your mother or your father passed, they were your mother and your father, and you had a step parent. It wasn't as accepting as it is now. As I mean, being a stepmom and not a stepmom and all of these things is just, it's a different ballgame now.
Absolutely.
So I don't think, maybe it wasn't Lizzie being facetious or bratty. It was just her, she's not my mom.
Actually, yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
But so they had lots of different witnesses, but Alice Russell became the star witness for the prosecution. And it's important because she spent so much time with Lizzie after the murders. She was also extensively questioned about the dress. The dress. Oh my God, the dress. She recounted that when she asked Lizzie what she was doing with the blue dress, Lizzie replied,
I'm going to burn this old thing up. It's covered with paint.
On cross-examination, defense attorney Robinson attempted to suggest that a guilty person seeking to destroy incriminating evidence would be unlikely to do it in so open a fashion as Lizzie allegedly did. It's true. If I knew that I killed somebody, I'm not going to pull out the weapon, like, oh, I got to clean my axe, or, oh, this dress is dirty, rip, fire. Especially, would you really tear it apart? Because there was a policeman right there around the corner. Like, I agree with Robinson with that.
Yeah. Emma even said, she's like, if you don't burn that thing, I'm going to.
So I have a question though, like with just that part is, everybody deals with grief differently. Like maybe she was spring cleaning and just getting rid of things that brought bad memories to her, and it was just an easy way for her to do it. You know, I'm team I don't know at this point, just because there's so many things that she could have been doing that were just dealing with everything that was going on.
Stress clean.
Yeah, I think it's just trying to stay busy. Like, you know, doing things, keep the hands moving. Idle hands are a bad thing, right? So.
Idle hands are the devil's playground, or whatever.
Yeah. But Alice Russell also recounted a conversation with Lizzie about a note, with, again, the one about Abby going to visit a friend. So she got that note from the messenger. This is why Lizzie was not more worried about looking for Abby, according to sources. She thought that Abby was away from the house. Again, Abby who? Right. But anyway, Russell said she sarcastically suggested to Lizzie that her mother might have burned the note. And Lizzie, according to Russell, then replied,
Yes, she must have.
Like, Lizzie did not realize it was a sarcastic comment. She's like, yeah, she must have. All right, whatever. Puttering around the house.
Just puttering around. That's what I'd do it. Why can't she?
So I hope that's why no one remembered to look for Abby, but honestly... Who?
I actually have a question. When this was all happening, when was this where she was drugged up? Was this like
house.
After she was drugged up?
Yeah.
So it might be still in her system, and she might be
the doctor, Bowen, said that he kept administering. He gave her a prescription, if you will, for morphine even as she was in the jail because she was so stressed. So it wasn't just a one-day deal. She had morphine for a long time. Yeah.
Oh,
and
fun.
that was part of the trial, the transcripts. They asked him, like, prolonged morphine usage, can that cause hallucinations and whatnot? Well, yeah, right. So, but anyway, I do have some excerpts that I cut on purpose. So Alice was questioned for some time about how Lizzie looked and acted after the murders.
Right, because you got to think, is she just high and cleaning?
I'm living my best life in this dress.
There's blood on it. I don't need it anymore. I'm just going to throw it in the fire.
Watch it burn. Whoa, Lizzie, calm down.
Well, she had the morphine and the caffeine. She had the both.
I'm not sure if he kept giving caffeine, but he said that the morphine was administered. She had that to stay calm.
Right.
I mean, if you're stuck in a jail cell or whatnot, even if you're in the policeman's wife's house at the station house, it's still stressful. So, in any case, Alice was questioned for some time about how Lizzie looked and acted after the murders. Specifically, she was questioned, of course, about the possibility of blood on Lizzie. Did you see any blood? Right. Lizzie did not have any blood on her person. Abby even said she did not see anything on Lizzie. And she said it was nowhere, not on her face, on her chest, on her arms, her feet, not even in her hair, which should have been like a location. If you were chopping your dad's head from behind, it should be, flying up and you're pulling the axe out at least. And so one question they asked her was her hair disturbed? What a Victorian question, because ladies always have their hair done properly, right? And so Alice's response was, I don't think it was. I think I should have noticed if it was disordered. Like, what a Victorian answer. The hair looked nice. But she was also questioned about the police investigation and how lackluster it was. And so at that, they said, do you wish to answer this question, about the police work? And so she said, yes, sir. I think one of the officers took the keys that lay on the bureau after Miss Lizzie had left and unlocked 1 or 2 drawers in her bureau and didn't search any farther there. I think they opened what she called her toilet room, pulled the portiere to one side, just looked there a little. I don't know how much they searched. I don't think very much. And they went into Miss Emma's room and looked around and opened the cupboard door in her room. And I remember one of the officers pressing against a bundle after he shut it, some pillow or blanket, something of that kind. And the bed was taken to pieces. That is all I saw. So there wasn't a lot of, like, searching, which I think you had mentioned, Penny. There was a conversation that maybe the dress was hidden between other dresses?
Or hidden underneath another dress.
That's right.
Like she could have put one of those wrappers over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you would not have lifted up a lady's skirt.
Or her bloomers.
Yes.
Oh,
Mama.
don't go for the bloomer drawer.
Well, I think someone had done some research and there was a possibility that, like, if she had dresses hanging, it was, like, inside another dress, like, even hanging. Yeah. So I just... Talk about lackluster police work.
There was one theory of if she put the pink wrapper on top of the blue wrapper as well. And Emma's like, no, that's not possible. Like, she was reclining on one of the couches at one point. Like, we would have seen the blue under the pink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I meant, like, hanging up in the closet if she was going to hide it.
Yeah, but I was saying, like, that's another thing. It's like,
yeah, even if they had hidden it, like, the cops didn't look anyway, so she
right.
It could have just been hanging there dripping blood, and they were like, I didn't see anything.
Must
It's
be
just
her
a-
flea bite.
just a weird case here, guys.
Man, her period. Oh, don't discuss the menstrual cycle. Oh, my.
The monthly sickness.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, the illness that she has.
The flea bite.
So overall, though, Alice's testimony was the only thing that the prosecution really could rely on, but it was filled with hearsay, and Robinson was able to, like, find a lot of holes in her conversation. Now, what I found interesting was the conversations with the doctors when they sent information and, body parts out, and to Joseph Hyde. So I'm going to move on to them because some of their discussion is really gross, and I love Penny loves reading the gross stuff. So Penny, tell us about Dr. Albert Diedrich.
He testified he had practiced as a physician in Fall River for 5 years, following 2 years of hospital experience at the Bellevue Hospital in New York. He stated, I went to the Borden house on August 4th after 2 p.m., examined both bodies. Blood on Mrs. Borden's body was of a ropey consistency and would not run. On Mr. Borden, it was a more oozy character.
It sounds very doctor terminology.
Would you describe the blood as ropey or oozy? On a scale of 0 to 10, how oozy was it?
On a scale of 1 to ropey.
It was ropey oozy.
Oh, no.
Mrs. Borden's body felt colder and was stiffer. Formed opinion that Mrs. Borden died first, should judge she died several hours earlier. This would prove that Abby did indeed, die first.
I just love how, like, when you're looking at the transcripts, like, that's literally what they were saying. I'm wondering if the transcript typer, like, cut out some of the important words, like, I thought Mrs. Borden's body felt colder. But, I mean, his discussion is her blood was coagulated. His blood wasn't. Abby died first. Thank you, doctor. Wow, enlightening. But anyway, so next was Joseph Hyde. He came in between that doctor and Dr. Dolan, which is going to be someone else that Penny is going to talk about. But Joseph Hyde was a police officer. He was the one that was on guard at the Borden house the night after the murders. So he was the guard placed outside. He said at about 9 o'clock at night, he saw Miss Lizzie Borden and Miss Russell go into the cellar and empty a slop pail in the closet there. I.e., they were dumping out their yum-yums from their chamber pots. Because, again, the basement's where the latrine was.
Yum-yums.
Yum-yums. He further saw Miss Borden go into the room in the cellar in which were the clothes taken from the 2 bodies, because they had placed the clothes from the deceased in there. Miss Russell did not follow her in there. Now, PJ, you had other comments that you had seen in the book. What else had been mentioned about that?
Yeah, just that he was suspicious, because, again, he's watching them until 11 o'clock at night, and he sees that they go down to the cellar, go back upstairs to the 2nd floor, and then 15 minutes later, Lizzie goes down alone to the cellar, and stays there for, I think it was an extent like 5 minutes or something, like a longer period of time than before. And then she returns back upstairs, and he thought that was quite suspicious. He did not like that.
But didn't mean anything really, like, right? Like, nothing comes of that conversation.
Right, yeah.
But, and you had done the research on the plumbing, and you learned that we already knew there was running water in the basement.
Mm-hmm, but there was also running water in the kitchen and the barn, too.
Yeah.
So,
which makes sense because the livestock and washing dishes.
Yeah.
But I don't have a problem with her going down to the basement twice, because you go down there, you dump out your yum-yums, and then you go down again, maybe to actually use the restroom, I guess, or to like really empty out and clean out your chamber pots that's ready for tomorrow. That doesn't really bother me, but it is like, why wouldn't you go to the bathroom when you're down there dumping it?
Yeah, why wouldn't you do it just in one go?
Maybe she has a really small bladder. Oh, wait. Lizzie, what were you doing?
Oh,
There were a lot of people in and out of her house that day, so it wasn't just her using the restroom.
Oh, there you go, Lizzie. Could it have been someone else?
It was definitely someone else.
Thanks, Nurse Jackie.
Was not me at all. Nope.
And if it was, what were you doing down there?
I would have just been pottering around for sure. Just kind of wandering through the house. There's nothing else to do, nothing good on TV.
It's no TV!
I meant nothing good to listen to.
Not on the radio, because there's no
my
radio.
audiobooks. I make the housemaids read the books to me.
The pigeons didn't have any letters on their legs.
Oh, the pigeons and I have a fun game.
Oh, really?
Where I say, hey, it's me, and they go, coo. And I go, it's me. It's Lizzie.
Go.
Yeah, it's me.
Go.
Yeah, it's me, Lizzie.
Go.
See, it's a fun game, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. All right, so after Hyde tells his story about the cellar situation, Dr. William A. Dolan is brought up to testify. And so this is the guy who actually was a really well-renowned doctor. So go ahead, Penny.
He stated, I have practiced medicine in Fall River for 11 years, received my education in the medical department of the University of Pennsylvania.
Woo! That's right, it's us. Sorry.
When I entered the house, I went into the kitchen and then to the sitting room. The body of Mr. Borden was lying on the sofa. Sofa was against the north wall of the room, running east and west, with the head toward the parlor and the feet towards the kitchen, that is, towards the east. The sofa was against the jamb of the dining room door. The body was covered with a sheet. Dr. Bowen was with me. I found that Mr. Borden's hand was warm, and the blood was oozing from his wounds and was bright red in color. The head was resting on a sofa cushion that had a little white tidy on it. The cushion, I think, rested on his coat, which had been doubled up and put under there. The coat, in turn, rested on the afghan or sofa cover. I made no particular examination of the wounds then, only stayed 2 or 3 minutes, went upstairs to see Mrs. Borden.
Hey, Nurse Jackie, how long does blood stay warm after you're dead?
Asking
on
for
a hot
friend.
summer day.
Asking
About
for a
the
friend.
same time it would for the body to cool off. It just varies on the time of day where it's at, things like that. That's why we always put the bodies in a freezer per se. But my thing is Miss Borden was upstairs, heat rises, so of course her blood's going to dry faster.
Very
her
true.
body's going to cool off.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
just think it's funny he stayed for 2 or 3 minutes and then went upstairs to see Mrs. Borden.
Yeah, I shook my head on that one too.
Yeah. So go ahead, Penny. Continue telling us what he said.
She was lying between the dressing case and the bed. I touched the body, noted the wounds on the back of her head, noted that her blood was coagulated and of a dark color. She was lying with her back exposed. Her hands were nearer the wall than her head. They were not clasped. The upper part of her dress, the waist, was bloody. I found an old silk handkerchief there and took it with me. It was nearer the wall than the head. It was not cut, but it was blood-stained. I was there examining the body for only 2 or 3 minutes. When I saw Mr. Borden, I had a clinical thermometer with me, but I did not use it.
Oh, I hate that line. I had a thermometer, but I didn't use it.
If Abby had been sick, like everybody else, and she was dehydrated, her blood would not have come out. It would not be oozing out. When you're dehydrated, your blood is thicker. It automatically is in your body.
Oh,
So if Andrew was okay and drinking more because he was out and about and doing his thing, he came home from somewhere, he was probably hydrated and they weren't.
okay.
Just another.
But how does it make you feel to know that the doctor had a clinical thermometer but didn't use it?
I'm not discussing that.
Okay.
No comment. No comment.
No comment.
At Mr. Borden's head, the blood was dripping on the carpet underneath. There were 2 blood spots on the carpet about 8 or 10 inches in diameter. Turning back to Mrs. Borden's body, I felt of that with my hand, touched her head and hand. It was much colder than that of Mr. Borden. Did not use thermometer.
Again.
Yep, it's a cold hand.
Special. He's special.
Her blood on the head was matted and practically dry. There was no oozing from it as in Mr. Borden's. I returned downstairs and made a more careful observation of Mr. Borden's wounds. At the time, I counted from 8 to 10. I made a more accurate examination later. He was clad in a cardigan, a woolen jacket, a black vest, black trousers, and a pair of Congress shoes. He had a watch and a pocketbook. The money in the pocketbook amounted to $81.65, 4 $10 bills, 5 fives, 1 $2 bill, 11 ones, and in his pocket, 2 50-cent pieces, 3 25-cent pieces, 6 tens, 5 5-cent pieces, and 5 copper cents.
I want to say he knows every piece of money in this guy's pocket, but did not use a thermometer. That is why I kept that in there, because I could chop that out, but I just needed to showcase.
What you don't know is there was $101.65.
The 20 disappeared.
That's his better observation status right there, is checking what was in the wallet versus the temperature.
Oink.
That's how you know he's legit. He knows what to take specifics on.
Oh, boy. Anyway, sorry, doctor, continue.
He wore a ring. I think a gold ring on his left hand. Went upstairs again, and with Dr. Bowen's assistance, lifted Mrs. Borden's body sufficiently to make a preliminary count of her wounds. Then collected from Bridget a sample of that morning's milk and of yesterday's milk, sealed them, and later sent them to Professor Wood. Went to the cellar, saw 2 axes and 2 hatchets. Took the heavy claw-hammered one and put it with the cans of milk. Returned to the house that afternoon and had the rooms and 2 bodies photographed. I removed the stomachs from both bodies, tying each at both ends and putting each into a clean jar, which was sealed, labeled, and with the 2 jars of milk sent by express to Professor Wood. Next day I examined, with a magnifying glass, the 2 hatchets at the city marshal's office. Found 2 hairs on one of them, put them on a piece of paper, then in an envelope, and delivered them to Professor Wood. There were spots on the axes that looked like blood or rust. I also delivered hatchets and axes to Professor Wood. On August 11th, at the Oak Grove Cemetery, we made a thorough autopsy. Present were Dr. Francis W. Draper of Boston and Drs. Cohn and Leary of Fall River. Examined every organ of Mr. Borden's body. Found them in healthy condition. The wounds in the head were the cause of death. We made an examination of them.
And before you get excited about the axe and the blood and the hairs, don't. So not only is this guy an idiot who probably stole $20 according to Lizzie over here, okay?
You did
it. He could not actually tell, like, there was no blood or rust and there was no hair. So, like, I actually chopped that away later, just so you know.
You chopped it?
And where did
I
you get
chopped
And
it.
you went to where? What school did he go to?
University of Pennsylvania.
What kind of doctor and stuff are they doing over there?
Well, you know, he did tie off the organs, so that's pretty cool. I do like that. Again, this is before real science. Anyway, but nothing there in that whole conversation could connect Lizzie to the murders. Overall, the Bordens were healthy. No poison could be found. They did the test right away. When you look at some of the transcripts, that was the first thing they tested because prussic acid will leave. Like, once it hits air, I believe, something happens and it disappears. I'm not a scientist. So, actually, when Dr. Dolan talked, it actually weighed positively for the defense, as the prosecution could not bring forth any solid evidence. He proved that people died, but he couldn't tell you when exactly, and he admits, I did not do my job by doing the temperature, my bad. Anyway, so after a week and a half, though, of all this, the trial finally came to a close. Both sides offered their closing arguments. For Lizzie, Jennings and Robinson both had closing remarks, and they both had some really good ones, but they lean heavily on the Victorian ideal. So first off, Jennings stated, "There is not one particle of direct evidence in this case from beginning to end against Lizzie A. Borden. There is not a spot of blood. There is not a weapon that they have connected with her in any way, shape, or fashion."
I'd argue there's a spot of blood.
There's literally one, but it can't connect her to the murder.
Yeah.
So when you look, I didn't put that part into the script because I knew we only had so long for this episode, but it was so tiny.
Literally the size of a pinhead.
Yeah. And they couldn't conclusively say it was from either murder. It could have been from the flea bite. However, the placement of it lower on the dress probably wasn't, but he couldn't say either way. And they didn't want to discuss menses. Like, well, we're going to move on from that unpleasant conversation. And so that was that. But anyway, following Jennings, Governor Robinson, in his closing speech for the defense, insisted that the crime must have been committed by a maniac or a devil, not by someone with the respectable background of his client. He said the state had failed to meet its burden to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that it was physically impossible for Lizzie, without the help of some compatriot, to have committed the crime without the timeline suggested by the prosecution. Robinson ridiculed the theory that Lizzie might have avoided getting blood spots on her clothes by killing her parents while, quote, stark naked, and argued that the murders might well have been committed by an intruder who passed out of the house undetected. The reason? Good Victorian women would not do that. They're not going to run around naked. That is inappropriate. What if she got caught?
The neighbors did hear someone clambering over their barbed wire fence in their backyard.
Ow.
Yeah.
Oof. There actually was a conversation about could a guy have killed Abby and then hid in a closet and then gone and killed Mr. Borden, and they couldn't say yes or no.
Yeah.
So there could have been. But anyway, Robinson continues, this guy's so very much Victorian. He said, I say then, at the outset, as you begin to contemplate this crime and its possible perpetration by this defendant, you must conclude at the outset that such acts as those are morally and physically impossible for this young woman defendant. To foully murder her stepmother and then go straight away and slay her own father is a wreck of human morals. It is a contradiction of her physical capacity and certainty. I said the case was brought to the district attorney by the Fall River Police. I have not time to go into any sarcasm or denunciation of these gentlemen. They are like a great many bodies of police that you find in all communities. Policemen are human, made out of men, and nothing else. And the blue coat and the brass buttons only cover the kind of a man that is inside. And you do not get the greatest ability in the world inside a policeman's coat. Oof. Remember, most of the policemen were what?
Irish.
So, of course, it's not the best kind of man right there. So, again, she's a pure Victorian lady. They're dirty Irish. So, maligning the policemen was perfect because it deflects that interest onto them, and they did shoddy police work. All right. Furthermore, though, he said that nothing, quote, connects her with the tragedies. No weapon whatever, and no knowledge of the use of one, as to her, has been shown. You know, if you had found her with some weapon of that kind in her control, or in her room, or with her belongings, that would be direct evidence. But there is nothing of that kind. It is not shown that she ever used an implement of the character that must have produced these murders. It is not shown that she ever touched one, or knew of one, or bought one. In fact, the evidence is that she didn't know where the ordinary things in the house of that kind were. And it's true. They never found a murder weapon, and as PJ said, it had to be a brand new one, and they certainly weren't brand new in that house. They were arrested. They did find a hatchet, and they thought they found blood and hair on it, but after it was examined by Professor Wood actually said at the trial, quote, that hatchet is innocent of blood. That hatchet has no hairs upon it of a human being. That hatchet could not have been cleaned because of the peculiar construction where it goes into the head. And he gave a very detailed discussion. He's like, even the cold water, hot water, whatever, there are grooves. It'd be impossible to wash out all that blood, especially if it had congealed, because they took the hatchets, pretty soon after the murder. So even if she had gone down really fast to the cellar and was down there for 5 minutes, it wouldn't have been long enough to clean off the blood. So the last thing, though, that Robinson notes, though, was the obvious lack of blood, because he said, quote, there was no blood on her, and blood speaks out, although it is voiceless. It speaks out against the criminal. Not a spot from her hair to her feet, on dress or person, anywhere. Think of it. Think of it for an instant. Yes, there was one drop of blood on the white skirt, as big as the head of the smallest pin, says Professor Wood. Less than a 16th of an inch in diameter, and that is every particle of blood that was found upon her clothing. I forbear to allude to what it proved in this case, Miss Borden's illness, monthly illness, at that time, and to tell you or remind you that Professor Wood said he would not undertake that blood was not the menstrual blood. He doesn't want to talk about it. He's like, I don't want to talk about it, but it was most likely her monthly illness.
We can't bring that up.
Let's just move on. But I just love how, like, it could have been from her menses, and the thought of ladies having this monthly issue was so disturbing for the men to even talk about.
They go, la, 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 I don't hear this.
Moving on from that disgustingness, yeah. So again, like, that'd be the only pivotal piece of that drop of blood, but there was no DNA sampling back then, so. Victorian code was also used as to why Lizzie was there, as to why she was at the house during the murders, apart from just puttering around. Which is actually a good reason. Robinson stated, in the first place, they say she was in the house in the forenoon. Well, that may look to you like a very wrong place for her to be in, but it is her own home. I suspect you have a kind of impression that it would be a little better for her than it would be to be out traveling the streets. I don't know where I would want my daughter to be than to say that she was at home, attending to the ordinary vocations of life, as a dutiful member of the household. So I do not think there is anything criminal about that. I.e., we're so glad you puttered. What do you think, Lizzie?
I agree completely. Puttering around is all you need to do. That's all I did.
Best defense is puttering around.
That's it. You just putter.
You just putter?
Yep.
And she was ironing handkerchiefs.
Yes, and that actually pops up in the trial. They tried asking about that, and they brought up to Alice Russell because they said, did you see any handkerchiefs out? And she said, yeah, I did. There were probably 2 or 3 that were ironed, and there were a couple that were sprinkled to be ironed. So Alice, you know, even if the prosecution had tried to make Lizzie look bad, the defense was able to be like, yeah, but...
Yeah, she said she didn't get far in the ironing because it just wasn't hot enough. So she did like 2 and then gave up.
Yeah. So, like, Alice actually helps Lizzie's story. She's like, yeah, the ironing was out. Like, she was working on it. Yeah. So, good job, Lizzie, for puttering.
No, thank you.
You're welcome. But overall, Robinson concluded Lizzie couldn't have killed her father, especially because of, ladies, their relationship. So it takes us all the way back to episode 1. And this quote, I'm going to watch all of us cringe. He said, quote, here was an old man with 2 daughters, an older one and a younger one. He was a man that wore nothing in the way of ornament, of jewelry, but 1 ring. And that ring was Lizzie's. It had been put on many years ago, when Lizzie was a little girl, and the old man wore it, and it lies buried with him in the cemetery. He liked Lizzie, did he not? He loved her as his child, and the ring that stands as the pledge of plighted faith and love, that typifies and symbolizes dearest relation that is ever created in life, that ring, the bond of union between the father and the daughter. No man should be her to say that she murdered the man that so loved her.
Ew.
Yeah. Major
ew.
gross.
Like, and we're done. But, like, for him, he's like, mic drop.
She's a daddy's little girl. She could never have done it.
What? All right, sorry. But, PJ, let's finish up this trial. You go ahead.
So on June 20th, 1893, the jury returned with its verdict in the Lizzie Borden trial. The jury deliberated for only an hour and a half before returning with its verdict of not guilty, and Lizzie let out a yell and sank into her chair, rested her hands on the courtroom rail, and put her face in her hands. There's a pretty well-known, like, sketch of that. And then she set out a second cry of joy, and the courtroom erupted in cheering.
Yep.
Interestingly, the papers also generally praised the jury's verdict. The New York Times, for example, editorialized, "It will be a certain relief to every right-minded man or woman who has followed the case to learn that the jury at New Bedford has not only acquitted Miss Lizzie Borden of the atrocious crime with which she was charged, but has done so with a promptness that was very significant." The Times added that it considered the verdict a condemnation of the police authorities of Fall River, who secured the indictment and have conducted the trial.
Again, like, yelling at the cops.
Mm-hmm.
Because...
Not stopping there, the Times editorialist blasted the vanity of ignorant and untrained men charged with the detection of crime. In smaller cities, the police in Fall River, the editorial concluded, are the usual inept and stupid muddle-headed sort that such towns manage to get for themselves.
I mean, what a quote. Again,
Love
Irish.
Yeah.
You know, actually, in the trial transcripts, many times it said, "But your name's Bridget. They called you Maggie, right?" "Yes." "And that didn't bother you?" "No, I didn't mind." But like multiple times they asked her, "Did it bother you to be called Maggie?" "No, not at all." So it's just interesting to see that connection to the Irish and, you know, putting them down. But yeah, blaming the cops. So now the question is, and we all have our opinions, did Lizzie do it? We can't prove it one way or the other. So either your team Lizzie did or Lizzie did not. It is probably fair to say that, however likely it might be that Lizzie did murder her parents, the prosecution failed to meet its burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The state's case rested largely on the argument that it was impossible for anyone else to have committed the crime. Had the defendant been a male, some speculate the jury might have been more inclined to convict. One of the defense's greatest advantages was that most persons in 1893 found it hard to believe that a woman of Lizzie's background could have pulled off such brutal killings. So again, Victorian times, I guess, can save you once in a while.
Well, statistically, too, like, females don't commit brutal murders.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually a more male thing. It happens, but it's more a male thing.
We tend to, poison more?
Yeah.
How about you, Penny? You know Penny. You're the psycho Penny.
Right, because we don't want to clean it up, right?
That's right.
That's so true.
Yeah, women don't want to leave messes.
Nope.
Well, I was watching Alias Grace on Netflix. By the way, great little thing you guys should watch. It's based off of a novel by Margaret Atwood. Very nicely done. But she mentioned, she's like, she was cleaning a sheet because it was covered in blood. She's like, why would I do that later? And like, why would I hurt somebody? Have you ever tried to wash blood out of sheets? Let me tell you, it's not easy. And so all I could think was, that's Lizzie Borden. But it's so true. We think cleaning. Are you sure? No, we're not going to do that. Blood's hard to get out. All right. So I'm very sad to say that Carrie could not discuss all the stuff that she found here because she broke her voice. She did a lot of research on Lizzie's later life. And in fact, it's wonderful. So I think we're going to have Penny do a lot of this for poor Carrie.
Thank you, Penny. You're welcome.
What?
Thank you.
Is that Abby?
Who?
I am Abby.
And guess what?
Lizzie did it.
Nobody cares. Who are you?
Do you guys hear anything?
No.
Okay.
No. We'll just turn her mic off. It's fine.
I think it's the pigeon's last gasp.
Yeah.
Oh, no, they stopped cooing. Their necks were wrung. So in any case, thank you, Carrie, in advance for all of your research. And Penny's going to pretend to be you. So go ahead,
Good luck.
Penny. So what does Lizzie do after all of this?
She bought a new house, which she named Maplecroft, located in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in town. Embracing her new lifestyle, she began to go by Lizbeth. In a gesture of remembrance, she and her sister Emma spent over $2,000. Today's money, that would be $69,026.
Oof.
On a 10-foot tall blue granite monument for their deceased relatives 2 years after the infamous murders.
Aw, so sweet.
However, if Lizzie hoped for a fresh start, she was sorely mistaken. Her friends abandoned her, people avoided her at church, and children would ring her doorbell at night and throw gravel and eggs at her house. For example, the Fall River Daily Globe had an article on May 9th, 1902, entitled Bothering Lizzie, Grown Boys and Girls Unwelcome Callers at Miss Borden's. In it said the police were called to the Borden home and led to believe the Hill boys and girls were trampling over the lawn, lambasting the side of the Borden home with decayed eggs, ringing the doorbell late at night, tying the doors, and calling her vile names. When Lizzie answered the door, the police were unable to capture the offenders.
So it's like ding-dong ditching, but to a whole new level, right?
Or the beginning of ding-dong ditching.
But then Carrie also found this next article, and it's so sweet.
But she baked the best muffins. The Spectator from Somerset. January 5th, 1978. Lizzie's former Sunday paper boy, Joseph D. Hopkins, recalled Miss Borden as a nice lady who made the best homemade muffins on the hill. He remembered her as paying on time, being a good tipper, 25 cents, and inviting him in for snack and conversation.
I like how back then it's okay to invite kids into your house and give them snacks. Just saying. No stranger danger. She makes the best muffins. All right. Anyway, sorry, Penny, go ahead.
As long as there wasn't a hatchet sitting in the corner of the kitchen.
Maybe she had it like behind glass, like a shadow
Maybe
box.
She finally got that poison. She put it in the muffins.
Well, he's still alive, so
Yeah.
No.
maybe she was testing to see how much you could put in before
He
they
was a
die.
good paper boy.
Oh, that's true.
They're hard to come by. In 1905, even her sister Emma turned away from her. Lizzie's frequent trips to Boston and New York to attend the theater and her friendship with actress Nance O'Neill caused a rift between the sisters. A party Lizzie hosted for O'Neill at Maplecroft was the breaking point. Emma moved out, later telling the Boston Sunday Herald, "I did not go until conditions became absolutely unbearable." The sisters remained estranged for the rest of their lives. Nance O'Neill was a female, well-known actress in America. The two most likely started an inappropriate relationship which caused tension with her sister. Same-sex relationships were frowned upon.
Dun, 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 dun.
The two had become close in the early 1900s. Their friendship was notable because it brought some scandal due to O'Neill's flamboyant reputation and the disapproval it drew from Lizzie's more conservative community.
Because we're moving into like the flapper time period, and so she's dressing differently. She probably isn't wearing all those petticoats. Not to mention the fact that it's unsubstantiated, but there's a possibility of them having a relationship, which Emma would have been completely against. But we talk about the psychosis of that, like Penny, this is for you because you're the psych person. Is it common for people who have been abused by like a man to then go to a same-sex relationship?
You often read that.
You do? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie agrees.
Jackie agrees. Hi, Jackie.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would make sense. And all of her friends that you mentioned here, Carrie, they're all females. There's no males that she hangs out with in her adulthood. So I find that like it's interesting.
In Rebello's book, he says, like, one of the theories is that she had all this pent-up rage from her father because she's very materialistic, like, always trying to steal nice watches and things like that, but he's this penny pincher, makes them live in, like, not squalor, but not the best either.
Yeah.
And so she just snaps one day from living in the closet and not living the way she wants to, even though they can afford it, and just takes out all of her rage on her parents.
And so now she gets to live flamboyantly
Yeah.
and come out of the closet.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Have lavish parties.
Yeah, boy. Or girl.
I did
Sorry,
get the
yeah,
sense
girl.
what I was reading that maybe she had a big crush on Nance O'Neill, but O'Neill maybe didn't see her in the same way and possibly used her for money.
Mm-hmm. I read that too. There's actually speculation that maybe she and Bridget had some kind of a relationship, but that can't be substantiated either.
No.
So,
But it made for a good movie with Kristen Stewart, apparently.
alrighty then. Add to the bucket list to watch.
Kristen Stewart.
Yeah, PJ does not like Kristen Stewart.
Statues have more emotions.
The ones that Lizzie bore.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Blue
blue
granite?
granite, yeah. So other friends, go ahead, Penny.
Another friend was Gertrude Baker. She was a close friend and travel companion. Gertrude lived with Lizzie at her home, Maplecroft, for many years. They traveled together frequently, and Gertrude was one of the few constants in Lizzie's later life. Other notable friends were Helen Layton and Mary Livermore. One was a friend from Fall River, and the other was an advocate for women's rights. These relationships highlight that despite her notoriety and the social ostracism she faced, Lizzie Borden did manage to maintain a number of significant personal connections throughout her later life. These friends and acquaintances provided her with companionship and support, helping her navigate the challenges of her post-trial life. However, Lizzie may have had the last word with the residents of Fall River. After a year of illness, she passed away on June 1st, 1927. In a final act of defiance, no one was invited to her burial.
Aw, slap.
She left some money to Gertrude, someone into trust, and the rest was to the Animal Rescue League of Fall River. She gave them $30,000 and shares of stocks. In today's currency, adjusted for inflation, that would be over $900,000.
I'm not sure if you can hear it, but our dog is barking upstairs. Maybe he's excited over having $900,000 of
He's
money.
doggy clapping.
Yeah, he's
in
like,
her
thank
honor.
goodness, money is important. He's really going at it. I think it's really cool that she gave away that kind of money to them, and she gave them shares in stock, which is going to help them for a long time.
Now we need to discuss the hauntings.
Of the house?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's some interesting things that go on there, like a lot of shadow people. There's a face that appears in the basement wall.
Oh.
Yeah. Abby is found in the room that she
Well,
was
we gotta stop
murdered in.
talking about it. There'll be another episode then. I guess we're going to do a 4-part series.
Well, there's not much to say about this.
There's enough. Well, we can always do a midweek mini then.
Okay, yeah.
We'll close out and make it mid. Okay.
That's a good
If
idea.
you're gonna do that, listen to the True Creeps podcast,
True
and
Creeps,
it's
okay.
find the Lizzie Borden house, because they actually stayed there and they experienced a lot of stuff. So
Okay.
Cool.
And-
All right.
these girls are like really skeptical and scared of a lot of things. So it was kind
Nice.
of cool to see that they went there.
So then we'll just do like a mini episode for that, and we'll tag that other podcast in so our listeners can listen
Yeah.
and hop over there. Cool.
Sounds good.
But listeners, don't leave us for them. Stay with us. But anyway, that is where we're going to end our 3-part series, because we covered everything from birth to trial to death. That is Lizzie Borden. Thank you so much, ladies, all 3 of you.
Boo.
No, Abby.
Very welcome. This has been a blast.
And PJ.
Hi.
Yeah, I said ladies and then PJ. He knows even in the
But
script.
you have to say, Lizzie, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't have anything else on my plate.
I was going to say,
There was no
were
mutton
you
on your
busy?
plate? There was no mutton?
Oh, no. No, I fed that to the pigeons.
Good idea, Lizzie. Good idea. Don't eat that mutton.
Thank you. I'm just eating pears these days.
Oh, my goodness.
Do you need to eat pears in heaven? Are you in heaven? Maybe I should.
Wait a minute.
I shouldn't assume.
Where are you, Lizzie? Are you still at your
Just
house?
puttering around.
She's puttering around in her house.
Is that like heaven or purgatory? Or
I don't know anymore. People are in my house all the time.
What level of hell is that?
wait, what level is that? I hate when people come to my house, so it's like I understand, like a level 7. Anyway. Well, thank you, all of you guys, for helping create this. And Jackie, thank you for popping in your ideas and hopping in for part 3. I really appreciate that you were just so accommodating to just be available.
No problem.
That's awesome. And so you ladies got to meet Jackie.
Yay.
So that's exciting.
Yay!
So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. We'll have a mini episode on the hauntings of the house. But overall, thank you for listening to the Well House Exorcism. Find us on Instagram as Well House Exorcism, one word. On Twitter X as wellhouse_exorc. Or on Facebook under Games Overboard because we're a subsidiary. Feel free to hop on our website as well, gamesoverboard.com. And please email us. We want to hear your thoughts. Like Jackie, you might come on last second to be a part of it. But as always, think spooky thoughts.